Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're all good now. Thank you all for being here today and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us for our 7th USP 800 preparedness webinar. Whether you've been with us throughout the whole webinar journey or this is your first time, thank you for being here. And as the series is winding down, today we'll be discussing how to prepare for when the inspectors actually come knocking on November 1st. And then next week we'll have our wrap up. So again, thank you for being here. And now I'll introduce our speakers for today. So first we have Ms. Laura Paxton. She's the CEO of Our Farmy. She's an expert in hazardous drugs and formulary systems. And then we also have Ms. Charlene Kristen, who's a customer experience specialist with Our Farmy. She was a certified pharmacy technician for over 20 years. And we're so glad to have both of these ladies on our team and to hear from them today. So now I'll pass it off to Ms. Laura.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks to all of you who have joined us again today for our next to the last webinar on USP 800. It's been a fun journey. We've learned a lot, and we appreciate all the time that you've spent with us. So next week, we're going to do the wrap-up. We'll review what we've discussed over these past webinars, and then we're going to show you a little bit about our site. One more thing I wanted to say to you is we thank you for the time that you've spent with us. Remember that all of this information can be found in video on ourfarmy.com. If you've missed anything or if there's something you'd like to go back and review. And we're going to start off with a poll.
All right. So our first polling question we have for you today is if the inspectors walked in the door today, would your facility be compliant with USP 800? And so that question should be appearing on your screen right now. And if you'd please take a moment to answer. I'll give it a few more seconds. Thank you, everyone. So now I'm going to share those results. And it looks like the majority said no, 86% of you, but there's that one person who said yes. So good job to you. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Carrie. Good job to you, that one person. When you look at this slide, first of all, know this. The slides and the statistics we're talking about today came from Pharmacy Purchasing and Products annual survey for USP 800 that they did last July of 2022. The new one will come out in July of 2023, but these statistics are fascinating. So we're going to talk to you about these statistics in addition to what we've seen with our install base of customers. So the first question is, or the first item that we're going to discuss is this PP&P survey asked if Joint Commission or someone came in to inspect, or do you feel like you're compliant right now? And only 30% of the people said that they feel like they're compliant right now. So that means that the statistics we're seeing in the survey that we just did are right on par. And the fact of the matter is, I'm sure that those statistics have improved since July of 2022, just because November 1st is the date. But the reality is, in a situation like this, when there's so much that you guys have to wrap your arms around, you don't know what you don't know until someone comes in the door and tells you what you've missed or what you don't know. So hang in there and just keep pressing on, because we're all learning together. So we looked at the survey results from 2021 versus the survey results from 2022, and the findings were very interesting. So in comparison, we're seeing that inspections are rising significantly, especially in the area of accreditation, where the numbers have increased by 20%. State inspections have increased, and CMS inspections have actually decreased year over year. Next slide. This is an example of some of the questions that are asked by CMS or the state board or the accreditation agencies. The questions have changed. The state board questions have gotten a lot more robust. CMS has stayed about the same, but remember this as you're looking at this information, because I know when you guys are getting ready for inspections, this kind of information is so valuable. This is going to be posted. You can come back to this and see this information and see the list of things that you need to think about. Carrie. And finally, 75% of healthcare facilities are leveraging the regulatory requirements when allocating resources for compliance. This is great news for us because in the past, now that it's looming, I think that you're perhaps getting the people in administration to pay more attention to this topic and the fact that you guys need money to pay for this issue, because it's not an easy task to put in place. It takes a lot of resources and it's an unfunded mandate. So we're seeing more and more of our people using the fact that November the 1st is coming up to get their administration to sign off on funding a program to help them with this. Also remember in our area for hazardous drug resources, we have an S-bar posted there that you guys can use, whether you use it for our software or whatever it is you need to get funded. Feel free to manage that and use it the way you need to. Also, if any of you have great mechanisms that you've used to get your administration to fund your initiatives, if you would like to share those, we would love to put those up in the hazardous drug resources area of our website. We can give you credit or we can anonymize it and not give you credit, whichever way is most important to you, because we want to protect the innocent. Finally, think about this. Who are you guys in charge of protecting? Look at that infographic on the right. That came from USP. I think they published that. I don't know. I think the first time I saw it was maybe 2017 or 18. It is mind-boggling when you think about the fact that the pharmacy is responsible for protecting all of these people in your organization. And if you think about depending on the size of your organization, thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands of people, it's astonishing. You've got to not only put the information together, but you also have to put it in such a way that the end user can interpret it and understand it. And when you think about the CDC estimating that 8 million healthcare workers are exposed to hazardous drugs every year, makes total sense when you look at all of the job functions that are touched by this mandate. So if you look at the slide or the image on the right, what you see is our interpretation. So we looked, when we were building the software, we looked at the infographic and thought about all the people that we needed to protect. And if you look at just some of the information, you see administration, patient care activities, extravasation, just going down the line. What we tried to do is make sure that we were able to address the handling concerns for each one of the people in that infographic and the way that they would go about doing their job. So this has been a very interesting, the AOR discussion has been very interesting. And I don't know, maybe some of you were on our assessment of risk webinar, and always go back to that because it's a great webinar and it's got actually different images on that webinar of the way some of our customers have approached their assessments of risk, and also just that are information on how to approach an assessment of risk, information that's in the public domain. But when we first started doing this in 2018, I remember having clients tell me that they didn't intend to do any assessments of risk because it was just too much. And then time marches on, and suddenly they begin to see that, well, if I just go by table 5, that's a whole lot of money. And secondly, how do I get people to comply with what we're doing here? So I believe as we continue down the path of USP 800, you're going to see more evolution on this assessment of risk, because I can tell you we've gone from seeing people who say we're not going to do any to people who understand that not only do I need to assess the drugs that are in my hospital, I need to look at the ones that are outside my hospital. And Charlene's got more perspective on this for us.
Thank you, Laura. We see a wide range in the number of AORs that are being written by our clients, from those that mainly focus on providing alternative containment strategies for only oral formulations, to those that write AORs for everything that USP allows, which is anything that is not an anti-neoplastic and any anti-neoplastics that do not require manipulation prior to dispensing. From what we have seen, the one issue that may force your hand to create AORs could be compliance. Nursing may not realize that the scope of hazardous drugs is not only chemotherapy. Recently, I worked with a hazardous drug oversight committee for a health system where nursing staff requested to take away the requirement of wearing gowns for any group 2 or 3 drugs because it would require a retraining of staff and disrupted their current workflow. Now, we all know that NIOSH Table 5, which provides general guidance on what PPE is recommended for each hazardous drug form and related activity, states gowns are recommended during administration of all formulations, with the exception of intact oral solids and pre-filled syringes or injectors. Adding assessments of risk for these drugs is how this health system worked around this, basically stating that pharmacy would dispense the drugs in such a way that it would mitigate the risk of exposure. We also need to keep in mind any student nurses coming into the workforce that may be working with a preceptor who has been in nursing for many years, because knowledge is power, right? Well, of course it is. As long as the knowledge that is being relayed is up to date on current standards and protocols surrounding new regulations and is focused on personnel safety as well as patient safety. Now, before we jump in here, I'd like to give you an update on the NIOSH list. It's coming. The 2020 draft is being pushed along, and the official name for it will be NIOSH List of Hazardous Drugs in Healthcare Settings 2023. Once it makes its way to the Federal Register, it will be official. We still don't have an estimated date, but we are obviously getting closer. So until then, we are still looking at 2016. That being said, NIOSH has just added 2 new drugs to the hazardous drug list as of May 9th. That's right, only 9 days ago. Lurbinectedin, Zepzelca, which is Zepzelca, and mirvetuximab soravtansine, which is Elahere, both are anti-neoplastic agents and therefore will be added to group 1. So, okay, back to the topic at hand. The majority of our clients include drugs that are on the NIOSH list. It is include drugs that are not on the NIOSH list. It is interesting to us that we have not seen this in practice throughout our work. Perhaps it's the evolution and gradual understanding and the mandate that the list of hazardous drugs should include, but not be limited to, drugs on the NIOSH list that are utilized in your scope of practice. We've seen as few as 50 drugs for those facilities that do not do any compounding or infusions, to more than 350 drugs for those that are including everything that could possibly come through the door, whether it be investigational drugs or a hazardous drug medication brought in by a patient on a continuing therapy, even some compounding agents that may be on the EPA list. Now, labeling is a USP 800 must. It doesn't have to be these labels per se, but these are just examples. Any hazardous drug that leaves your pharmacy must be labeled as such. And next, the facility signage. So your facility needs signage in the hazardous drug infusion area and the compounding area. Also remember signage for patient rooms for those inpatients that are receiving hazardous drugs. Think about visitors, non-clinical staff, for example, dietary staff, environmental services, and that maintenance person that just needs to fix a television. Everyone has the right to be protected. Laura?
Thank you, Charlene. So 92% of healthcare facilities said that they practice segregating hazardous drugs from non-hazardous drugs in their storage areas. We wanted to show you this image to show you how some of our clients are actually producing some of that or presenting some of that information to their end users. Once again, you can always come back and look at these images when you have more time to look, because I'm about to go through a few more images. And 96% of facilities do not use pneumatic tubing systems to transport hazardous drugs. And this is an image of one of our clients who, and this is how they present that information to their end users about using the pneumatic tube system.
So here you see just a handful of the shoulds from USP 800. So while shoulds are not required, keep in mind that your local regulatory agencies may decide that they're a good idea and add them to their list of things that they want to strongly suggest. Let's look at a couple. So you should be reviewing any drugs that coming into your facility and deciding if they need to be added to your list. And then one that always surprises me is that the plastic backed mat used in compounding is a should. In all my years in pharmacy, a plastic backed mat was always used during compounding of any hazardous drug. Our must and shoulds documents will be placed on the Our Pharmacy Hazardous Drug Resources page, so you might want to take a look at those there. Laura?
Thank you, Charlene. So in talking about closed system transfer devices, 79% of facilities say that their nurses are aware of closed system transfer devices. And if you notice with this image, you see the administration label in the upper left-hand side, and you see how this client is actually communicating what medications and when to use the closed system transfer device. Back to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Laura. So wipe sampling is another should. Here we see that in the this is the right side. So here we see in the 2022 survey, 41% of facilities are already doing wipe analysis. While it is a should, it's highly recommended to gather a greater understanding of where you may need to focus on increasing protection. Carrie, let's do a poll.
All right, so here's our second question for you today. Is your pharmacy involved in spill drills? So you should see the question pop up right now. And if you please take a second and answer, that'd be great. All right, we'll give you a few more seconds. Thank you, everyone. So it looks like we're at a solid 50-50 split. 50% of you said yes, your pharmacy is involved in spill drills, and 50% said no. Thank you.
So while an increasing number of facilities are conducting spill drills, this practice remains pharmacy-centric. Those facilities running spill drills on patient care units or in the receiving area are still in the minority. And here's an example of an image on how our clients inform people on how to handle spills. Do we have any questions?
All right.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay, well, if you have any questions, you can always email us. You're about to see my email address and Charlene's email address. And if you just don't want to ask a question in this forum and you want to send us an email, we'll be happy to receive that and answer your question. Also, our upcoming webinar, our last one is next week, where we'll just do a summary and show you. I'm going to show you our software. So just heads up on that. I'm going to show you our software. I tell you what, I thank Carrie and Charlene so much for all of the hard work and effort that y'all put into these webinars. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for tuning in and listening to what we have to say. I hope it's been useful. And I really want to do a shout out for PP&P magazine, because their USP 800 annual survey is such an interesting source of information for all of us to share and to know about. So we hope to see you next week. Notice the QR code on the screen if you'd like to scan it. It's where you can go and have access to any of our hazardous drug resources pages. Once again, if you are using something that's not there that you find valuable, give us a shout, tell us about it, send us the info. We'll put it up there, because the intent of this is to create something where all of us can share information and best practices. And then the next slide is going to tell you about next week's upcoming webinar and Charlene and my email addresses. And once again, we thank you all for sharing your day with us and spending time with us. And we hope to see you next week.